This is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, Text 25, Text 27. We'll discuss on this verse. Let's begin with some prayers before that. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'm grateful to be here with all of you today, and we'll be discussing on the topic of how the Srimad Bhagavatam demonstrates the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Bhagavad Gita has many different teachings, and I'll focus on one particular teaching. So this verse is one of the most direct references to the Gita in the Bhagavatam. Deshakalartha yuktani vrittapopshamani cha haranti smaratas-chittam govinda bihitani me. So deshakal artha yuktani, that which is equipped with, that which is infused with awareness of deshakal, of time, place, circumstance. And what does it do? What is it capable of doing in different time, place, circumstances? Ruttap upashamani cha, that which removes the ritta, the distress in the heart. Upashamani, to pacify, to remove. Haranti smaratas-chittam, and not only does it remove the distress of the heart, but actually it charms the consciousness. Here haranti means capture, captivate. It's used in a positive sense. Haranti smaratas-chittam Govinda abhitani me. What Govinda, Lord Govinda has spoken to me. Abhitani. What he spoke to me, I remember that and I have cherished that now. And this is the verse which Arjuna is speaking after he has been totally shattered by a double disaster. The loss of the departure of Krishna and the disappearance of his own abilities. So this itself could be a big subject, but I'll come back to this later. That Arjuna was overwhelmed and he remembers the message of the Gita, and then he becomes absorbed in Krishna, he becomes peaceful. So now, how does this verse, this refers to the Gita, but how does it demonstrate the teaching of the Gita? To understand that, let's look at what is the teaching of the Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is having 18 chapters, and Krishna starts speaking primarily in the second chapter. He just mentions one line in the first chapter and a few non-instructive verses, more of like a pep talk kind of verses, second and third in the first chapter. But the first instructive verse that Krishna speaks is This one 2:11. Ashochan anvashochastva pragyavadamsya bhashase gatasuna gatasumsya nanushocanti panditaha. He's saying ashochan, that which is not worth lamenting. Anvashochastvam, that which is not worth lamenting, you are lamenting. While speaking wise words, the wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Nanushocanti panditaha. So here the word, some variant of the word shok comes thrice. Asochan, anvashochas, nanushocanti. So essentially, what Krishna is telling over here, Arjuna, is that do not lament. Not lament. But telling a person do not lament is not very helpful. Somebody is in grief, somebody is in distress. Do not, it's like a child is crying because the child's toy is broken. We tell the child, don't cry. Well, okay. It's a valid and maybe vital goal that we want to achieve. But what we need to do is provide that child a means to stop crying. Maybe they give child another toy. Maybe they give child something to eat. Maybe start talking with the child and get the child's mind to get distracted somewhere. Or maybe help the child. If the child is not a child, the child is grown up a little bit. Help the child to understand that the toys are going to break. Toys are not worth lamenting. So when Krishna is saying Ashochan, do not lament, or not specifically Ashochan means not worth lamenting. So he says that Arjuna, what is not worth lamenting is being lamented by you, despite your wise words. Because the actually wise people do not lament either for the state of life or the state of death. So essentially, Panditaha, the wise people. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, indicating to Arjuna that now I will give you the message by which you will become wise and you will stop lamenting. So the purpose of the Gita is, if you can infer it from its first verse, is to give the wisdom that will free one from lamentation, from grief, from distress. Ashochan. And this same point, this is Jiva Goswami's analysis in the Sandarbhas. He says we can understand the essential purpose of a book by looking at what is in the beginning and what is at the end. So the first instructive word is Ashochan. And the last instructive words that Krishna speaks is Ma Shuchaha. So now after this Krishna speaks, but most of the verses are like Phala Shruti. They are like the fruits of the glory of hearing the Gita. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, do not lament. So from the first verse to the last verse, the beginning and the conclusion is remarkably consistent. And that suggests that what comes in between is the wisdom that will free Arjuna from lamentation. Ma Shuchaha, Ashochan. Is this not worth lamentation? Oh Arjuna, that's what Krishna says in the beginning. And then he says throughout the Gita that I will show you various ways by which what you are lamenting is not worth lamenting. And now the conclusion is therefore do not lament. So to free us from lamentation or distress of any kind in general, that is the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. And that purpose is being fulfilled. Here, when Arjuna is saying that Ruttapa Upshamanicha, that the distress of my heart is now going away. So now we know, of course, this happened to Arjuna at the end of Gita, because Arjuna says the Shto Moha Smriti Labdha Tat Prasadar Mayachut Sthitosmi Gata Sandeha Karishye Vachtam Tava. I'm well situated. So it happened to Arjuna at that time, and it happened to Arjuna now in the Bhagavatam also. So the first point I mentioned is that the Bhagavad Gita frees Arjuna for lamentation. That is the purpose of the Gita. Now, how is this Gita purpose demonstrated? The teaching of the Gita? Because Arjuna has become free from lamentation as described in the Bhagavatam also. However, the key point here is this first line in the verse. Desha kal artha yuktani. It is infused with awareness, yuktani, equipped with, infused with, enriched with awareness of time, place, circumstance. Or he specifically is more of, here it is time, place, and purpose. Artha is purpose. But in different circumstances, we have different purposes. So you can translate it as circumstance also. So this is a very important point, that the Gita is not actually focused only on solving Arjuna's problem. Arjuna was unsure whether I should fight or not fight. And he was not sure whether to fight or not fight because he was not sure whether his Kula Dharma or his Kshatriya Dharma is more important. His Kula Dharma is his duty to his family, his dynasty. I have to protect them. How can I attack them? And his Kshatriya Dharma was his duty to his profession. He was a warrior. He had to protect society from aggressors. So protect family, protect one's family, protect society from aggressors. But what does one do when this family itself becomes the aggressors of society? That was his dilemma. So now Krishna could have solved the dilemma very easily. What does that mean? Krishna could have said, I am God, I am telling you to fight, fight. So Krishna could have finished the whole Bhagavad Gita in 6 words. I am God, obey me, fight. Bhagavad Gita, over. Now that would have solved Arjuna's problem at that time. But the Desha Kalartha Yuktani would not have been there. Because yes, see, Krishna does not want to make Arjuna forever intellectually dependent on him for decision making. A good guide gives guidance, but a great guide not only gives guidance about the particular situation, but the guidance for a particular decision, but a great guide gives guidance so that the student can oneself arrive at good decisions. So what Krishna is doing in the Bhagavad Gita is, he takes Arjuna through a process of philosophical reasoning, or rather ethical reasoning based on philosophical analysis. Its ethical reasoning is what is right, what is wrong. Philosophical analysis is to understand what is right and what is wrong. You need to understand what is real, what is not real, what is enduring, what is fleeting. So through that analysis, Krishna does a process of reasoning by which he shows Arjuna how I arrived at this conclusion. And then it's like, say, suppose we are hungry and we go to our mother or somebody in our family who is a very good cook. And I'm hungry. They say, okay, they cook something and they give it to us. Well, our hunger will be satisfied. But in the future, if they are not available and we are hungry, what are we going to do at that time? So it's one thing to cook food and give to somebody who is hungry. That's helpful. But to show them, okay, this is how I cook this. This is what you use. This is how long you heat this. This is what you do, how you mix it, how you grind it, how you stir it. Okay. Then, even when it's a different situation, the other person might not be there. It's a different place, different time. That person can cook for themselves. So the Gita does talk about the soul's spiritual dependence on God. But this dependence is not meant to cripple one's initiative, cripple one's intelligence, cripple one's energy. Rather, Krishna equips Arjuna with a live example of a process of philosophical analysis and ethical reasoning, and then Arjuna can apply it to himself later. So when they say Desha Kalartha Yuktani, this is equipped with awareness of time, place, and circumstance, or it is usable for all time, place, and circumstances. So what does that mean? The Gita, relatively speaking, is not a very big book. The 700 verses actually the Gita could fit in just the front and back pages of New York Times, if you put it in a small font. The entire Gita will be about 4 pages of a contemporary newspaper. And you say, how can this just 4 pages have the solution to all the can give guidance for all time, place, circumstance, for all time, place, purposes? Well, that's because this is not about specifics. The specific times, the specific places, the specific purposes, they can be innumerably variegated. And no one book can give answers to all particular situations, because it's not just different times, places, and purposes, but it's also different individuals. At least in this case, Arjuna was the first. It is Arjuna in the Gita and Arjuna in the Bhagavatam. But in this world, there are different individuals. So the Gita focuses on principles. And it's those principles that are to be learned by the study of the Gita. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to be independently thoughtful. We need to be able to think for ourselves, because no one else can live our life for us. Many of us may not have much access to our spiritual guides, spiritual teachers, spiritual masters. But even if we had access to them, they cannot live our life for us. It is each of us. I have to live my life for myself. You have to live your life for yourself. And when I say I have to live my life for myself, what does it mean? That means I am in a particular body and mind. I'm in a particular society. I am in a particular environment. There are 3 circles: Adhyatmik, Adi Bhautik, and Adi Daivik. And no matter how close I am to my spiritual master does not inhabit my body and mind. It is I who inhabit my body and mind. Now, they may be able to understand our mind better and help us understand it also. But it is we who have to deal with it. They don't live in our social circle. It is we who have to deal with our social circle. So what we need when we focus on when we seek spiritual knowledge is not just decisions, but training in the decision-making process. And that is what will guide us. That is what will help us to go through life's challenges. And externally speaking, Arjuna's situation on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and Arjuna's situation in Hastinapur, where he's speaking this verse, they are completely different. In Kurukshetra, Arjuna was still young. Arjuna was fully ready for the fight. And suddenly he was defeated internally. He was overwhelmed by his mind, by confusion, by dejection, and he couldn't fight. And the result of the speaking of the Gita was that Arjuna became confident, and eventually he became victorious. So that's the context of the Gita when it was originally spoken. But now we consider Arjuna's context here in Hastinapur. What has happened? See, generally, we need 2 things in our life. Here the word Desha, Kala, Arthani, it is used. So Artha can mean meaning. Iska Artha kya hai? What is the meaning of this? But Artha can also mean purpose. Like the 4 Purusharthas of life are. The 4 purposes of human life are Purushartha. So Artha can mean meaning, Artha can mean purpose. So the idea is that when Arjuna was in this situation in Hastinapur, he had been stripped at one level of both the spiritual meaning of his life, or the thing that gave spiritual meaning to his life, and the thing that gave material meaning to his life. Both. The spiritual meaning was his life was centered in the service of Krishna. And Krishna had departed from the world in a devastatingly shocking way. It is the whole Yadu dynasty was there on one day, and the next day it is all gone. It's all gone, and even Krishna had gone. So it was devastating enough for Arjuna to lose the spiritual meaning. We could say that that's what ultimately gave purpose to his life. So in our life, there is meaning and there are means. Meaning is what we seek in our life, and meaning is what we live for, and means is what we live with. What we live with. So, for example, a responsible person may live for their family. I have to take care of my family, I have to take care of my children, I have to take care of my parents. That's what gives meaning to their life. And their means may be, I work in this job and I earn money. So the money is the means, the family is the meaning. That's at one level, you can understand this. So to lose means is bad. To lose meaning is worse. To lose both means and meaning is the worst. It can be devastating. Suppose somebody has a doctor and they have a big hospital, and somehow the economy tanks or something goes wrong and they lose their hospital. Now it will be terrible. It will be shattering for them. They lost the means of living. But still, if their meaning was, I want to serve people, I want to serve humanity, I want to treat people, then as long as that they have that sense of meaning, what will happen is they can find a job somewhere else. Maybe they can rebuild things. And then they can move on. But suppose a person's a doctor's whole life is centered on the idea that I'm going to treat people and I want to save people. And suppose such a doctor comes to know that the field that they are working in is, they spend decades of their life working in that field, and actually that whole field has been completely corrupted by big pharma. That the medicines that they give people, actually there are far cheaper medicines available, far better medicines available, but the medicines that they were taught to give, those medicines actually prolong the disease of the patient so that the big pharma could make more money. And at that time, it can be completely morale shattering. The thing I gave my life for, it's all pointless. Why did I do all this? Why am I doing all this? So to lose means is bad, but to lose meaning is far worse. At the start of the Bhagavad Gita, if we consider, Arjuna still had his means. So for Arjuna, he was still a great archer. As a powerful archer, he could fight and he was fighting. He had the ability to fight. But at the Kurukshetra war, what happened is that, at Hastinapur, what had happened was, Arjuna had lost his means. His archery ability had suddenly disappeared, mysteriously, without any explanation. He was taking the queens of Krishna from Dwarka to safety to Hastinapur, and some infidel cowherd men attacked, and Arjuna's arrows, which had been amog his arrow, he had been infallible. Here, what to speak of missing the target, they were not even reaching the target. They're falling short. Now, there are various ways a warrior can be frustrated. It can be, there are different ways of being defeated also. It's like, if you consider a batsman may get out, hit the ball and they get caught somewhere. That's bad. The getting out is bad. But a batsman is batting and a batsman completely misses the line of the ball and this middle stump is shattered. That's not just getting out. That's actually a humiliating way of getting out. If sometimes the ball hits in such a way that this happens rarely in cricket, but it's like the ball hits the stump in such a way that not one stump, but all three stumps get knocked down. It's like totally humiliating. So, or in tennis, we can say there's the concept of a bagel. Bagel is that a player is defeated 6-0, 6-0, 6-0. It's like total humiliation. So for a warrior, for an archer may be defeated. Sometimes the archer may be outsmarted by another archer, maybe more skilled. The archer shoots arrows, but the opposite person dodges the arrows. The opposite person counters the arrows, and the attack is getting thwarted. But the most humiliating thing for an archer is that the archer's arrows don't even reach the target; just fall below the target itself. It's like somebody is like, say there's a game like a javelin throwing or shot put throwing, and this person is a champion, and the champion is thrown far distances the shot put, and now there is an initial qualifying line that even a child can hit across that, and that's what enables that person to qualify. And this world champion flings the shot put with the full strength, and it doesn't even cross the qualifying line. That's not just defeated, that's humiliated. So Arjuna was humiliated like that. So Krishna, the person who gave meaning to his life, and archery, that was the means of his life, both were lost. Both were lost. So in that sense, the predicament that Arjuna faced in Hastinapur was far greater. At Kurukshetra, Arjuna faced another predicament. His means were still there. Meaning was lost. He said, what is the point of fighting? If I fight and I lose my relatives, so like earlier I said, a responsible person may be one who earns money for their family. So he's thinking, if my family, if my elders, Arjuna was a very diligent student. So whenever he would achieve something in archery, he would go and report to his teacher. And his teacher's appreciative smile is praising words, is encouragement. That would give meaning for him. And the same for Bhishma. Bhishma was a respectable, venerable elder for him. He says, what is the use of winning this kingdom if the persons for whom I would be doing all this, they would be killed. And they would not just be killed, they would be killed by my hands. Previously, Arjuna is known as Pandava, he's son of Pandu. So Pandu, when he had been the king, he had traveled across the world and he had conquered the world. And at that time, when he came back to the kingdom, he had brought huge chariots filled with wealth as the tribute given by the various kings. And when he came back and Bhishma saw trophies of his victory, Bhishma embraced him and blessed him and lavishly praised him. And that was what had given Pandu far greater fulfillment in all the victories. So for Arjuna, what had happened was, he had lost the sense of meaning. He says, what is the point of fighting? He said, even if I win the kingdom, he said, it's not going to be he says, it's no use for me. He said that actually, even if I win not just this kingdom of the earth, even if I win the heavens, it's not going to dry up the grief that is there in my heart. It is sapping up my existence. So Arjuna had lost the sense of meaning. He still had means, but he had lost the sense of meaning. And Krishna told Arjuna, you're not fighting for gaining a kingdom. You're not fighting to please your relatives. You are fighting as a service to me. Your identity as a Kshatriya is one level of identity. It's one functional identity. Your identity as a Kurunandana is one level of identity. But your most fundamental identity is that Mamaivam Sho Jiva Loke. You are my part. And you are meant to play a part in my plan. And if you play your part in my plan, you will be elevated, you will be liberated, you will be contented. Therefore, do my part. So what happened was the Gita elevated or shifted and elevated Arjuna's locus of meaning. There are two locuses of meaning for Arjuna. Okay, why am I fighting? Okay, I can gain the kingdom. Why am I fighting? Oh, I can please my relatives. But both these two locuses of meaning, they were pulling him apart. They were at conflict. So Krishna revealed a higher locus of meaning. Higher locus of meaning. And that was what gave Arjuna confidence. That was what enabled Arjuna to fight. So now what happened was, here at Hastinapur, Arjuna had lost his means. At one level, he had lost the meaning also. Krishna had also departed. The person for whom he was living had departed. So what happened? At that time, if you see the series of verses over here, this starts from the 5th verse and it moves forward. Here Arjuna is remembering the various ways in which his relationship with Krishna developed. He starts by telling Yudhishthir, Vanchitoham Maharaja Harina Bandhurupina Yena me Paratam Tejo Devamiswapanam Mahat. He says, Vanchitoham, I am deprived, O King Maharaja. Whom I have deprived of? Harina Bandhurupina. That Lord Hari, who was my friend. Yena me apaharitam tejo. And because he has departed, along with him, my archery ability, my tejo, that has also departed. And this was not ordinary tejo. This was not ordinary ability. This was such that Deva Vismapanam Mahat. It was so great that it astounded even the Devtas. That has departed. And from that point onwards, Arjuna remembers the various pastimes of Krishna. And as he's remembering the various pastimes of Krishna, actually it's almost a complete life history he's giving. All the times when Krishna helped in miraculous ways. And he even mentions times when Krishna was not directly present. But Arjuna knew that he was successful because of Krishna's grace. And in this way, as he remembers Krishna, how Krishna has acted on so many occasions in his life, Arjuna is right now feeling abandoned. Krishna has left me and gone away. But he's remembering that Krishna has helped me on so many occasions in the past. And as he keeps remembering this, then what happens is, he remembers. Now he knows, see, there's one thing which is knowing and another is remembering at the right time. And remembering in a way that is not just intellectual, that is real for us. He remembers that Krishna is still with me. Krishna is still the Lord of existence. Krishna is still the Paramatma in my heart. And I can still connect with him. I can still serve him. Although not externally, but internally. Desha Kalartha Yuktani. So what happened over here is, the Desha and Kala are different. The Artha is also different. The purpose on the battlefield was, on Kurukshetra battlefield was, to serve Krishna externally, by acting in the world assertively to establish Dharma for the service of Krishna. But here, the Desha was different, the Kala was different, the Artha was also different. The Artha was, now Krishna had completed his mission, and Arjuna realized that Krishna's mission for me is also over now. And he turned inward. And he became absorbed in Krishna. And Evam Chintayato Jishno Krishna Pada Saroruham Sauhardena Tigadhena Santa Shanta Sid Vimalamati. So Evam Chintayato Jishno, in this way, when Jishno is the name of Arjuna. In this way, when Arjuna contemplated Krishna Pada Saroruham, he started meditating on Krishna's lotus feet. It's interesting, the words that I use over here. He is saying that generally Arjuna and Krishna, they were friends. So there is very little record anywhere of Arjuna actually touching Krishna's feet in the Mahabharata. When they would meet, they would hug each other. But here it is said he remembered Krishna's lotus feet. Krishna pada sarovaram chintayato. What it means is that he was not just remembering Krishna, the person, he was also remembering that Krishna is not just an ordinary person, Krishna is the supreme person, Krishna is God. He is remembering Krishna's position. And of course, Krishna's position, remembrance did not separate him from the affection that he had. Sauhardena tigadhena, with very deep, very intimate affection, he remembered Krishna. It is not just an intellectual remembrance. Oh, there was one person who lived long ago and he's passed away. Filled his heart with emotion. But Shantasid Vimalamati. This remembrance made him peaceful. Shantasid Vimalamati. His consciousness became free from anxiety. So the idea here is that he understood that Krishna is still with me. No matter what things go wrong, Krishna is still with me in my heart. And by remembering him, I can connect with him. And I can feel his presence. And I can immerse myself in him. And in this way, he became peaceful. So for all of us also, the Gita offers many, many different lessons. But the one lesson here is, in the world, many things can go wrong. The things that are our means can go wrong. The things that give us meaning can go wrong. But ultimately, while there are many things that may give us meaning in life, we have to find out the highest locus of meaning. The one locus of meaning that will never be taken away from us. And that is Krishna. It is not so much Krishna's personal association as it is the service to Krishna. And when we do that, when we focus on remembering and serving Krishna, then we have something which we will never lose. That is life's eternal asset. And in one sense, what Arjuna does here through remembrance, through smaranam, in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that same thing Arjuna's grandson will do throughout the Bhagavatam, through smaranam aided by Shravanam. So for Arjuna also there's smaranam aided by Shravanam, but the Shravanam was in the past. He had heard Krishna's message in the past and he remembered in the present. He turned toward Krishna and he became absorbed in Krishna. For Parikshit Maharaj, it was both simultaneously. There's the smaranam, but the smaranam was aided by the Shravanam in the present when Shukadeva Goswami was speaking. And at the end of the Bhagavatam, just as Arjuna has become absorbed in Krishna over here, similarly Parikshit Maharaj also became absorbed in Krishna. And he departed from the world. Actually, by the time the Takshaka bird came and bit him, and his body erupted in flames, Parikshit Maharaj's consciousness had already been immersed in Krishna. And he didn't feel any pain because he has already been transported to the spiritual world. It's his body that burnt, but his soul was already liberated. And if we consider the one last point I'll speak, and then we can have a few questions, that the Desha Kala Artha in the Bhagavad Gita, the Artha, if we consider, Arjuna, after remembering Krishna and hearing Krishna's message, gained victory. On the other hand, here it was not that when Arjuna remembered Krishna, he gained any victory. No, the battle was over. He had lost. But still, Arjuna gained inner calm. He had inner contentment. And for Parikshit Maharaj also, at the external level, the tragedy was not averted. He was cursed to die unfairly for a minor infraction, and he died. But what happened was, it was only his body that perished. His consciousness was elevated and liberated. And so the Gita's message can empower us in both ways. Sometimes it can empower us to change our situation dramatically. And yatra yogeshwara Krishna yatra partho dhanudharajate tatra shri vijayo bhutir dhruvani tirmatirmam. Victory can be attained sometimes. But sometimes our consciousness of Krishna, we may be completely absorbed in Krishna, but our externals may not change. but our internals will change. Srila Prabhupada demonstrates this in his life. Prabhupada was devoted to Krishna throughout his life. But for the initial 30, 40 years of his life, Prabhupada, he tried sharing bhakti in India, but it was just not working. And he came to America and he was dramatically successful. And then, toward the end of his life, Prabhupada came back to India and he departed from the world in Vrindavan. Now, at one level, we can say that Prabhupada's magnum opus, the biggest contribution of his life, literary contribution, was the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada could not complete it. He was in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto. The 10th canto is considered by many to be the most important part of the Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada could not complete that. You could say that was a failure. That was unsuccessful. But Prabhupada did not feel that way. Prabhupada kept speaking the Bhagavatam, the purport as long as he could. But when he was asked, do you have any final wishes? Prabhupada said, Kuch ichha nahi. Kuch ichha nahi. I have no desire. Not material desire, not spiritual desire. Prabhupada was simply wanting to serve Krishna. If Krishna wanted him to have the triumph of being translated some complete Bhagavatam, Prabhupada would do that. If Krishna wanted him to depart earlier, Prabhupada was ready for that. And of course, it is only external vision to say that Prabhupada did not complete the Bhagavatam. Actually, it is Prabhupada lived on through his followers. When his followers completed the Bhagavatam, it is through them Prabhupada was completing the Bhagavatam. The external success came, but not necessarily in a way that was immediately apparent to the material vision. So as devotees, sometimes we'll get success, sometimes we'll get failure in our material life, sometimes even in our spiritual life. But if we are absorbed in Krishna, we may lose means, we may even lose meaning, but we'll find the ultimate meaning, Krishna. And therein will be our life's greatest enrichment. This is the enrichment that Arjuna found. This is the enrichment that Parikshit Maharaj found. This is the enrichment that Srila Prabhupada found. And by all their blessings, by all their examples, we all also can find that enrichment through the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll summarize. I spoke 3 main points today. First was, spoke about how the Gita demonstrates the Bhagavatam. For that, it says, which teaching did we focus on? That this particular verse says that Arjuna's freed Dhruttapopshamanicha. He's freed from lamentation. So the purpose of the Gita is based on 2.11 and 18.16, first word and last word, that to give the wisdom that will free Arjuna from lamentation. And that's what happened to Arjuna at the start of the Gita, and that's what happened to Arjuna in the Bhagavatam. Now, how do we normally deal with grief and lamentation and sorrow? We have two things. We have means and we have meaning. So when there are problems in our life, I have money to deal with this issue. I have a problem in my life, my family is there. I want to work for them. I bear all the problems for them. So to lose means is bad. To lose meaning is worse. To lose means and meaning is the worst. So Arjuna at the start of the Gita had means, but he suddenly lost meaning. What is the point of a kingdom if those for whom I wouldn't want to win the kingdom will be killed? So Krishna told him, yes, you have to find a higher level of meaning. You are not a Kurunandana, you are not a Kshatriya, you are my part, Mamamsha. And you work for my service. And in that, it will be your good, everyone else's good, and even the good of those who will die in the battlefield. So that finding that higher meaning was what enabled Arjuna to tap the means which are still there with him, and then to attain victory. At Hastinapur, as described in 1.15 Srimad Bhagavatam, Arjuna lost both means and meaning. Arjuna lost meaning because Krishna departed from the world. Arjuna lost means because his archery skill deserted him, and deserted him in the most humiliating way. Not that the opponents defeated him in archery, but his arrows didn't even reach his opponents. And then in such a situation, Arjuna again remembered Krishna's word in the Gita, and he was pacified. He realized that that same Krishna who had led him throughout his life, Krishna had not led him so far to abandon him now. Krishna was still there within his heart. And the artha was radically different. There, Arjuna attained victory in Kurukshetra. Here, Arjuna was defeated. But the Gita is available for all times. It has wisdom that applies to all time, place, and purposes, because it focuses not on giving answers, but giving the process by which answers can be arrived at. And just as even in the face of defeat, Arjuna and Parikshit Maharaj were absorbed in Krishna, just as Prabhupada was also enriched by Krishna's presence, even when he was relatively unknown in the early years of his outreach. He became world celebrated across the world in the peak years of outreach. And then even when his Bhagavatam project remained incomplete, when he was about to depart from the world, Prabhupada was absorbed in Krishna and enriched by Krishna. So when our locus of meaning rises up to focus on Krishna, to serve Krishna, sometimes externally in the world by doing his will, sometimes by accepting his will and turning inwards, accepting whatever situation we find in our life. When we do that, then we also can be free from lamentation and our heart can be enriched with Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for a wonderful session. And thank you so much again, like to bringing that appreciation for Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. That, like, even in the hopeless case, like, losing the means and meaning, like, somehow by connecting to this transcendental literature, that we can be peaceful, like even in those situations. And how Krishna, like, brought this Bhagavad Gita, like, focusing that this can be used for all the time, places, and all different meaning of life. Thank you for bringing that out. So before question and answer, I would like to share the screen and just have 2 minutes announcement. So every Wednesday we have our Wednesday Sangha. If those are interested to join, they can join our program. So next week we also have a wonderful speaker, and this Sunday also this in-person program. Bergen and Mataji will be speaking in our center. And we do have a weekly Bhakti Lecture program. Who want to join the Holy program, they can always join. And there is a Bhagavad Gita reading every day from Monday to Friday, from 12 p.m. to 12:15 p.m. Everybody can join. And also every morning from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. We have a japa call. Devotees can join the same Zoom call every day. So we'd like to take the questions. Devotees can, if you have anyone has a questions, please raise their hand or they can unmute themselves and ask the question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can I ask?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Prabhuji. Amazing class as well as always. Like, I'm simply amazed and like humbled by how like you can easily take us to the I mean, unimaginably deep, the depth of Krishna Katha, like which in general is like not possible for someone like me to think of that. Oh, I never thought of this aspect of this Leela or this pastime. Oh, this, I mean, this can be thought in this way. This Leela can be interpreted in this way. So it was really amazing, Prabhu, the example of Arjuna and then Parikshit Maharaj, and then how it connects to mood of Srila Prabhupada, like making perfect sense, and like really it helps to strengthen to handle all the situation that we can face in our spiritual life. So I have a question around this, Prabhu, that like when like Arjuna went through a humiliating situation where like when his arrows was not even able to reach his enemies, but Arjuna in that moment as too, like he remembered Krishna and pacified himself. But because Arjuna wasn't at that stage of Krishna consciousness or or the devotion. But for like someone like me, when like this kind of humiliating situation happens, the bhakti is taken over by the material emotions, like, and then it kinds of block the thinking or what to think of. So how, like, we can practically deal with this kind of situation and utilize these teachings?
First, thank you for your appreciation regarding firstly about the points from the Bhagavatam. Well, I have been studying the Gita for many years now. I've been writing at Gita daily, and that's where I because of that contemplation, I've got some insights. Much of what I spoke is there. This new book, Releasing Bhagavad Gita, which is available on Amazon also, in case any of you like to get it. We can also send it from here, from Brooklyn, where it is available. I read a few other books also. But coming to your question, now, when it says Desha Kalartha Yuktani, that also means that the Gita can be applied at our level. That Krishna gives, for example, multiple levels, 12, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, where he speaks about multiple levels at which we can connect with him. And yes, when our sense of meaning is shattered, say we are humiliated, it is extremely difficult. If we are defeated, humiliated, it is very difficult. But if we just maintain a spirit of service, Krishna, please give me the strength to act properly in the situation. How can I act to make things better, not worse? We have that, we will find some source of meaning, some source of strength we'll find, and we'll be able to move forward. So now sometimes it is said that God never tests us beyond our capacities. But many times it appears as if the tests we are being given are way, way beyond our capacities. So the point is, it's not that our capacity is always fixed, or what passing a test may also mean. Sometimes by failing in a particular test, we may develop humility. And that development of humility is actually passing the test. So sometimes somebody may pass a test, but if that passing the test, there may be a test of temptation, there may be a test of suffering. They pass that test, but if that makes them proud, they may pass the test externally, but they may fail the test, actually speaking, because they didn't develop or deepen their connection with Krishna. So my understanding is that rather than thinking that what is my level of advancement and whether I can face the situation or not, I say, anyway, if a situation is going to come in my life, I have to face it. Whether I'm advanced or not, I have to face life as it is. So the way to face life is not that we are expected to imitate or act necessarily at the same level as Parishit Maharaj or Arjuna. But underlying it all is that we all have an essential choice. That I can act, whatever be my situation, sometimes it may be a terrible situation, I can act to make things better, or I can act to make things worse. Now, that is the essential choice. And acting to make things better is actually acting in a mode of service to Krishna. Because Krishna is Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam. Krishna is the well-wisher of everyone. So Krishna wants what is good for us and for everyone. So when we act to make things better, that action itself is action in the mode of service to Krishna. And we may feel that I can't, I don't know how long I can take this pressure. How long can I act like this in the situation positively? Okay, don't worry about too long. Just take it one day at a time. Just take it 1 hour at a time. Just take it one conversation at a time. We may be broken, but instead of lashing out at somebody whom we are talking with, let's try to be kind. Let's try to be gentle. Let's try to be helpful. And as we keep taking one step forward, we'll find that greater clarity will come, greater strength will come, and we'll be able to face that situation. So I feel that this whole analysis that I am not advanced enough, so what can I do? It is not at all a productive question to ask. Because if we were not practicing spiritual life at all, and still a problem had come, we would not even be considering spiritual advancement. We would be considering, okay, how can I deal with the situation? So sometimes the thinking that I am not spiritually advanced may make us more helpless or more apathetic to dealing with our life's problems than we would have been if no spirituality had been a part of our life. Yes, spirituality is not at all the problem. Spirituality can really empower us. But if the lamentation over the lack of spiritual advancement is what paralyzes us, then we have to say that that is not worth lamenting. The whole purpose of the Gita is to don't lament. So don't lament over the loss of material things. Don't lament about the lack of spiritual advancement also. Surrender means we serve Krishna from where we are right now. And Krishna knows where we are. So Krishna is not expected. Krishna is not a demanding God who is going to expect the impossible from us. So this whole point that we are not so advanced is for the sake of humility. Yes, we need to remember we have a long way to go ahead. But when dealing with problems, just think of what can I do to make things better in a mood of service to Krishna. And don't lament about the lack of advancement. Does it answer the question?
Yes, Prabhu, yes, perfectly. Thank you so much.
Yes, Shraddha Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. It was a wonderful, wonderful class. And I also like the point when you mentioned that we as individuals are in that place and circumstance, and we as individual has to face a situation. And that we are talking about Bhagavad Gita's main teaching is don't lament. I've often thought about this thing that, yes, we do understand that we are the soul, we are not this body. And really this whole philosophy and principle come to a big test when we lose somebody very near and dear one. And so my question is how to deal with that kind of a loss, when you know, say I'm talking about my parents, my grandparents, or maybe my siblings with whom I've grown up, or my parents who've given birth to me. So, you know, throughout our spiritual practice, we are taught, you know, yes, it's all the bodily relationships and it's really the bodily connection. But at that point in time, when I know that, you know, after all, they were my parents, you know, how to deal with that situation and not feel betrayed by our own self, that okay, all these while I was doing spirituality, and now when the time has come, I'm really lamenting, and you know, I just can't stop thinking about it. I just can't stop being morose about it. So how to deal with that situation, Prabhu?
Thank you for asking this question. Yes, sometimes we have a very dehumanizing understanding of spirituality, that it's only human when somebody who is very close to us, if they depart, it's only human to be afflicted. You know, Arjuna, when he lost Abhimanyu in the Kurukshetra war, he was shattered, he was enraged, he lashed out at his own brothers, saying, couldn't you do anything to protect my son? Are all your weapons just ornaments? So he lashed out, and not once did Krishna mention over there, hey Arjuna, you have forgotten Dehinosmin Yatha Dehe. Hey Arjuna, why are you so attached? Not once. Because there is a time for philosophical education, and there is a time for human connection, for human encouragement. We have to acknowledge our humanity. So somehow we say somebody may be a very advanced devotee, but somehow they're in a car crash and they meet with a fracture and they're in pain. Is it at that time we're going to tell them that you are not the body or the soul? Yeah, I know I'm not the body and the soul, but right now my body is injured. I need some treatment. So offer that treatment to me. So the Gita says there are three levels of reality. There is the body, there is the mind, and there is the soul. So just as when their body is injured, when the body is injured, somebody's fractured, somebody's multiple fractures in their body. They may know that I'm not the body, but because their body is injured, they may not be able to walk. They might not be able to lift things. And we understand that. And then we try to take care of them. We try to support them at that time. So similarly, when we lose someone who is very dear to us, it's like our mind gets wounded. It's an emotional wound. And it is going to take time to heal. The Bhagavatam itself describes that after the Kurukshetra war got over, the Pandavas and Kunti and others, they performed the last rites of their deceased relatives, and they grieved their loss. So grieving is a natural part of healing. Grieving is essential for healing. It's so when we say don't lament, that does not mean suppress your emotions or deny your emotions or have no emotions. Lamenting especially means that we stay fixated on the past and we don't move ahead in our life. So sometimes we cannot move on from our grief, but still we can move on with our grief. If somebody had a prominent place in our heart, that when they depart, there will be an emptiness in our heart, no doubt about it. But while that emptiness itself may not go away, the human heart has the capacity to expand. And that emptiness will not gnaw us so much over time. So there's a time required for grieving. And we shouldn't think that just because I'm grieving right now, that means I made no spiritual advancement. That is a very heartless understanding of what to expect from oneself because of one's spiritual growth. There's a story from the Sri Vaishnava tradition that one person went to a sannyasi and he said, I think I'm ready to take sannyas. He said, why? He said, my wife died. I didn't cry a single tear. The sannyasi says, go and get married again. He says, what? He says, your wife was close to you. If you couldn't cry for your wife, how are you going to cry for Krishna? Krishna is far away. How are you going to cry for Krishna? Now you say that is material attachment, this is spiritual attachment. Well, that may be true. But ultimately, it's the emotions. The emotions are essentially the faculty of the heart. So if somebody is not crying, is it because they are detached or is it because they're stone-hearted? Is it because their emotions are not misdirected? Detachment means our emotions are not misdirected away from Krishna. But hard-hearted means our emotions have become deadened. And if somebody's emotions have become deadened, then they are very unqualified for the bhakti will be extremely difficult for them. Spiritual growth will be very difficult for them. So just take the time to grieve and try to find supporting devotees and supporting environments where we can grieve. In fact, I have done several courses on this. So if you go to the Govardhan Eco Village website, there I have done a three-part course on growing through grief. I did during the COVID pandemic, where a lot of devotees a lot of people had lost their loved ones and lost their family members. So there is a way to grieve, and that is not simply telling ourselves or telling others don't lament. There's a systematic way to, just as we would deal with a physical wound. Initially, if our hand is fractured, we keep the hand in a sling and we don't move it. And afterwards, and gradually we start moving it. So similarly, when we are emotionally wounded, we may need to withdraw. We may need to do what it takes for us to heal. So that is that is very much a part of the Vedic tradition. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
Hare Krishna, Gail Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Nice to hear from you. Missed you in New York this year.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, I was happy that you acknowledged the fact that this saying that we often hear, that God does not give us more than we can handle. So can you repeat? You know, I mean, we do see that does not seem to be true. You know, so Can you repeat how we reconcile this? because this is like a pet peeve for me.
Yeah, okay. So what I said is that sometimes when we face some problem, what is God's definition of handling that problem? What's God's purpose in giving us that, in letting that problem come in our life? That we may not know. So what I said is that sometimes we may face a temptation or we may face a suffering which causes us to collapse. And we may say, I failed in this test, and why did if God wanted me to, if God never test me beyond my capacity, then why did I tried my best, but still I failed in this test? Why did God test me so severely? So the point I'm making is that the purpose of God's tests may be different from what we think are the purposes. Sometimes through that collapse, through that collapsing amid the temptation or distress or whatever, through that we may develop humility. And the developing of humility is the actual passing of the test. So just by being unable to handle a test, if we recognize more our dependence on Krishna, our need for spiritual growth, or sometimes we may also recognize that, okay, this is what I thought I should deal with problem, but this is not the way things work. Maybe I have to expand my understanding of Krishna consciousness. Maybe I have to refine my map of reality. And so there could be different purposes. I personally don't, there are many sayings, many quotes, many verses, but we all have to see what is the effect of a particular saying or a particular statement on a person. It's based on that it is to be spoken, or based on that we ourselves can speak it. Sometimes when we say that if we insist that God never gives a test that we can never pass, then what happens is if somebody fails in a test, and not only are they failed in the test, they also feel burdened by guilt that they failed in the test. I could have passed this test. God would not give me a test I could not have passed. I passed in the test. That means what? That means, I'm such an unworthy person. I'm a worthless person. Well, when already we are in trouble because of something, we don't need unnecessary guilt to further crush our spirits. So sometimes we just not know why Krishna is sending something in our life. And at that time, just, as I said, act in a mood of service. Krishna, in this situation, what can I do to make things better? What can I do? Prabhupada, when he came to America, he says, Achi kichu karjatabe anumane. Nahi ke no anibena eyagrastane. It's a terrible place. I'm alone. Prabhupada doesn't speak all this, but that's implied. This is completely spiritual. It's like a spiritual wasteland. Nobody knows anything about Krishna. Prabhupada has come here. He says, you must have some purpose for me, Krishna. I don't know what the purpose is, but I know.
Yeah, there's a purpose. Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, we have to expand our definition, actually, of what it means to pass tests, actually. That's, right? That's the point.
Yes.
Yeah, one other thing is, you said that Krishna is not trying to make us into robots. He wants us to learn how to cook for ourselves, basically, and
yes.
So and because of that, he gives us how did you put it, that he gives us instructions on how, I guess, he instructs us on philosophy so that we can apply that philosophy to the various circumstances of our lives, so that we can figure out for ourselves the best way to serve him. Is that accurate?
Yes. So 2-3 things are there over here. That when Krishna wants us to Krishna wants us to harmonize with him, to love him, to serve him. But at the same time, Krishna wants us to do it voluntarily, lovingly. Krishna has given us our individuality, and individuality means includes our intelligence, it includes our desires, it includes our desiring faculty, it includes our decision-making faculty. And Krishna has not given it to us for us to reject it. Krishna has given it to us so that we use it. We use it in a way that is for our good and for others' good. Just like parents, when they have a child, they want their child to grow up and become a good human being. As devotees, we want our children to become good devotees. But is it that the parents want to micro-control every single move in the child's life? No, that's not the purpose of parenting. So the same applies to Krishna. But Krishna is a supreme parent. And if Krishna were if the purpose of all of existence is ultimately reciprocation of love, then it is through our expressing our individuality in a mode of service to Krishna that Krishna experiences love. No, Krishna doesn't want robots because robots don't love. Sometimes we overemphasize the fact that we have to obey Krishna. But yes, we have to obey Krishna, but ultimately the purpose of obedience is the expression of the heart. It is not just the submission of the head. Okay, I submit to you, Krishna, but I offer my heart to you. That obedience is out of love. So, is it that there is one narrow path? On this path only Krishna wants us to walk throughout our life. And if we don't walk on that path, we are lost forever. No. Krishna, there's a direction Krishna wants us to go. That is come closer to him, to act in a mood of service to him. And there is variety within that. So there is scope for individuality within that. And each gopi in the spiritual world is different. Each gopi has different abilities. Each gopi serves Krishna in her own individual way. And Krishna is pleased by each gopi. So that applies to each gopa also. Each member of the spiritual world.
You know, walking the path of obedience, that does seem narrow. So I'm having trouble reconciling, the fact that Krishna wants us to be obedient with him to the fact that Krishna wants love from us. How to reconcile these two things, because obedience seems narrow, love seems broad.
Okay, that's a good point. Thank you. Obedience seems narrow, love seems broad. Let's put it this way, that as a child, a small child is not developed enough intellectually to know what is beneficial, what is harmful. And therefore, the child is told by the parents, do this and don't do this. And the child has to in this way be protected. But should a child be dependent eternally or lifelong on the parents for guidance? What I should do, what I should not do? If an adult child cannot take decisions, then that would be considered a failure in parenting. The adult child has to run to the parents every time for making decisions. That would be considered a failure in parenting. So eventually, the adult child will make decisions using their intelligence, which the parents have helped them develop, given them the experience. And then the love at that time would be that although the adult could do various things, but the adult still spends time with the parents, takes care of the parents, and does whatever is needful for them. So we say that obedience is definitely a part of love, because obedience is an acknowledgement in our relationship with Krishna, at least, and another relationship also, a parent-child relationship. The obedience is an acknowledgement of our inexperience, of our ignorance, of our finiteness. And then as we grow up, now if you consider these three things, our ignorance, our inexperience, and our finiteness. Our ignorance can be overcome as we gain knowledge. Our inexperience can be overcome as we gain more experience. Our finiteness is something which we never transcend. So then what happens is that there will be times when even as somebody is purely devoted to Krishna, still they will be confused what to do, what not to do. But as devotees are wiser, devotees become more mature, then they become more clear and clear of this is how I want, this is how I can best serve Krishna. So obedience is one part of bhakti. See, let's consider the traditional varnashram system. The brahmachari stays in the Gurukul, and that's what the Prabhupada will often quote those verses. Brahmachari stays in the Gurukul and learns. And there, initially, the Guru instructs, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. But then, the level of instruction that the brahmachari gives to the brahmachari receives from the Guru, after the brahmachari leaves the ashram, the brahmachari becomes a grahastha. Then, the Guru is not going to be that much available, and it's not relevant. It's not appropriate also at that time to expect for a grahastha to expect that level of guidance from the spiritual master, from the Guru. So what applies in normal relationships, whether it is, you could say, in the material family structure, within the spiritual varnashram structure, that applies in a relationship with Krishna also. So Krishna wants our love. But initially, the expression of our love is through obedience.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
afterwards, it is not through defiance. You can think of obedience as one thing and defiance as the other thing. But we could say it's more through our individuality. We have dependence, we have independence, and we have interdependence. Now, ontologically, in terms of the nature of reality, we are always dependent on Krishna. But in terms of relationships, Krishna, we want to offer our heart to Krishna, and Krishna wants our heart. We look for love, and Krishna is the reservoir of love. So love is always a relationship of interdependence. Now, while Krishna is Swarat, Krishna is ultimately fully independent. That's what the Bhagavatam says right in the first verse. But that same Krishna feels incomplete, not understanding Radharani's love for Krishna. And that same Krishna comes as Mahaprabhu. Now, our mind, when we say this is all very exalted, then that is true. But the principle of love is universal. So, I'll conclude this because this could become a much longer answer also. My understanding is that Prabhupada's instruction that we should be independently thoughtful has been substantially neglected, and that has led to two things: an unhealthy ethos of dependence, which can lead to lack of development of the individual. And then when the guidance is not available, when the spiritual master departs, then there is complete devastation. And if you see Srila Prabhupada, right in the 1970s itself, and most of his disciples were just 3, 4, 5 years old, Prabhupada, before most of his senior most devotees were more than 5 years old, Prabhupada established the GBC. And Prabhupada said, you take decisions. You consult me when required, but you take decisions. So now, did Prabhupada want this ethos of taking responsible decisions only for his senior disciples and for all subsequent devotees? They all have to consult his senior disciples. So his senior disciples don't have to consult him for everything, but all the subsequent devotees have to consult their senior devotees for everything. No, Prabhupada showed Prabhupada showed through his own example that he wanted us to become independently thoughtful. So unfortunately, that instruction has been neglected. So one side problem is that sometimes there is too much dependence, which can lead to disruption when the guidance is not available. And the other problem is that sometimes when there is too much dependence, individual initiative is lost. And for those devotees or those people also who have a lot of individual initiative, a lot of individual energy, a lot of individual creativity, if they see an ethos of dependence, not just in the initial stage, but constantly, then they get alienated. They get alienated and they may leave bhakti, they may not even come to bhakti. So rather than thinking of obedience or love as two dichotomies, just think in terms of a real relationship with a real person. How would it be if we are in a real relationship with a real person and there was nothing new about that person? If we could completely predict from today till the end of my life, if I speak this to this person, this is what this person is going to speak. If I do this person is going to do that. If I go here, this is what this person is going to say. If there's nothing, if that other person is just like a predictable programmed machine, we would get fed up of that relationship. We'd be bored with it. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So think of it as a real relationship with a real person. And with that understanding, a lot of things will become clearer.
Yeah, I mean, I see the obedience as you were saying, is required initially while there's not, that maturity maybe of love.
Yes.
And then as maturity develops, then, we can become more creative, I guess you would say, about how we serve the person.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So we could say the obedience is, okay, let me put it another way, that the obedience is that we have to serve Krishna. The independence is how we serve Krishna.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So both can be harmonized that way.
Mm-hmm.
There are many different ways in which you can serve Krishna, but it is that we are meant to serve Krishna.
Yes. And actually that's another point that I wanted to bring up, that I was actually surprised that you said that the purpose of the Gita is to not have us lament for what is not to be lamented, when I thought you would have said something more like it's to love Krishna. I thought the purpose of the Gita was to love Krishna, not, it seemed like to not
that is
lament
true.
what
No,
it seems like such a
that is true, but there is a contextual purpose, and there are multiple levels of purpose of the Gita. Now, what I said is what Jiva Goswami says in his commentary. He's basically analyzing what is the purpose of the Bhagavatam, and in that sense, he says this is the purpose of the Gita in that context. But the point is, yes, Arjuna at that particular point is in lamentation, and when we say that the purpose of the Gita is to free Arjuna from lamentation, but how is Arjuna freed from lamentation? By redefining and elevating his object of love. So as I said, locus of meaning, I use the word. Locus of meaning ultimately, you can say, evolves into the object of love. So by telling Arjuna through philosophical reasoning, philosophical analysis, that the supremely meaningful object of love is Krishna. So, and because Krishna is never lost from us, therefore there will be no lamentation. As long as if the object of love is say wealth, the object of love is family, the object of love is fame, the object of love is even our own abilities, then those will be lost and that will lead to lamentation. So yes, Gita's purpose is to love Krishna in the context of where Arjuna is at. It is that Arjuna is lamenting, and the Gita. So Ashocha, not worthy of lamentation. Why is it not worthy of lamentation? Because while we may love various things in the world, the ultimate object of our love is Krishna. And when we love Krishna, then yam labdva cha param labham manyate nadikam tata. Yasmin sthito dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. Once we become absorbed in loving Krishna, then we don't feel that I need to love anything else, anyone else. We become content in that love. And even great distresses won't disturb us so much.
Mhm. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those wonderful questions. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Shall we
Krishna.
stop here, Prabhu?
So we can take the last question. Rashima was raising hand for a long time.
Sure. Okay, yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the class. I have a question, Prabhu. I was listening one of your class, and in that you mentioned to deepen the relationship with Krishna, we should connect the Lord with the things that matter to us, for the things that we want to matter us. So in that case, Prabhu, like say suppose right now we are miserable for a particular situation and all we want to focus on that and we pray that solve this problem, and once this is solved then I will be like serving you and something like that. But what if that problem is solved and we forget and Maya will get swayed away with Maya? So how do we contemplate this? How to comprehend this? Any insights on that? I mean, Krishna would know, right? That I mean, I don't know, because Krishna knows what we don't know also. So maybe at this point of time, we are thinking that we want spiritual life and we want devotional life and all that. But once our current problem is solved, then we are back to our material world.
Well, yeah, there is a process. That's why it's like there are various degrees of love. Suppose, a boy proposes to a girl, please marry me. Will you marry me? And the girl asks why. And the boy says, I have proposed to every single other girl in the town. Nobody's marrying me, so you please marry me. That will be that will not be a very flattering proposal. It will be almost insulting proposal. Now, if that girl still accepts the proposal, that means she really loves that boy. Isn't it? That's why, although like she is the last alternative for the boy, but still she's accepting that. So for many of us, we try everything in this world, and when nothing else works, we turn toward Krishna. We pray to Krishna. But still, Krishna accepts us. That shows actually how much Krishna loves us. But eventually, if the relationship between the boy and the girl is to mature, then that girl has to become that boy's first choice. Mm-hmm. Yes. So yes, so it's in one sense in our relationship with Krishna, Krishna is so accommodating that he accepts us even if we are his last choice. But that Krishna accepts us when we are his last choice shows his love for us. But what shows our love for Krishna? That we raise him from our last choice or our lower choice to our first choice, our highest choice. So how will that happen? Well, for that, various things are required. It is not just that some promise made under duress will subsist us throughout, will sustain us later on. There are negative motivations for the practice of bhakti. Oh, I'm having the suffering. I'm not having it. Will solve this problem. Krishna, please solve this. I will devote myself to you. That's like a negative motivation for bhakti. And any motivation at one level is good. But if the relationship is to be sustained, we have to ourselves find positive motivations. What is it that attracts me about Krishna? What is it that about Krishna that gives meaning and joy to my life, that makes me want to voluntarily turn toward Krishna? So when we find that, then we will possibly connect with Krishna. So yes, devotion during distress is also good. Krishna appreciates that, because at least during that time they're remembering Krishna. But Krishna wants us to choose him even when we have other options also. And that's why distress during happiness during prosperity is, sorry, not distress. Devotion during prosperity, devotion during happiness is actually a greater, may well be a greater test of devotion. When in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is described that the child in the womb prays to Krishna, I'm suffering so much. Please, I surrender to you. Please, I will be your devotee, please. And even says that, don't let me come out of this womb because I'll forget you over there. Please let me stay in this womb so that I can remember you. And it's described that he actually sees the Lord at that time. Sees the Lord, but then Vanchito. Then what happens is the child is born and the child forgets. So is it when the child prayed to Krishna, that Krishna, I don't want to forget you. Then why did Krishna put the child in a situation where he may forget again in the world? And many times we forget. That's because that is devotion when there is no option. The child is in such unbearable suffering that there's no option, the child turns to Krishna. So that is still devotion, but it's not very mature devotion. So when we come into the world, it is not that Krishna has rejected us, but rather Krishna wants us to choose him even when we have other options in the world. So for doing that, that is the way we are expressing our love. And for doing that, we have to ourselves find something that is lovable in Krishna, something that attracts us toward Krishna. And we usually find that by associating with devotees, by hearing from them, and by thereby developing our relationship with Krishna. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhuji. Very well. Yeah, understood. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srimad
Hare
Bhagavad Gita ki